Welcome, listeners, to the Talking Trades podcast, a podcast all about the trades in New England and beyond. I am your host, Chris Levesque, the man who starts every day with a new horizon. And joining me, as always, is the greatest co-host, the Dr. Electrician with a positive charge, Edward Rivera. And today, listeners, we are picking back up with our conversation with Zach Saunders from episode 1, Knowing Yourself is a Superpower. We're going to continue that conversation because we just couldn't stop. There were so many golden nuggets and so much value in our conversation, we had to split it into 2 episodes. So we are going back to episode 1, Knowing Yourself is a Superpower, part 2. Let's hit it.
No, I was gonna say that also that kind of quiets down the term. I don't know if you're familiar with this. You probably are. Quiet quitting. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like I remember in a previous role where my inbox was just so overwhelmed. I would have 200 emails, right? And you're like, God, where do I start? What do I do? And I kind of adapted that process as going through, clearing out your email. And I did it once a week instead of once a day, but I would go through, mark what I needed to follow up. That way I knew the next day to follow up, whatever it was. But everything else, like all the crap emails, delete. But it's like adapted that process, right? You get so overwhelmed. 200 action items? How the hell am I going to do that in one day? So I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to sit here and stare at it.
Right. Yeah, and for me, I think my version of that is instead of seeing an email from, like, hey, Bob and Debbie email because they want an update on, where we're at in the process. Yeah. Instead of that being I'll get back to them when I have some time, or I'll get back to them when this, or I'll get back to them. It stopped allowing me the parachute of I'll get back to that when I can. Wow. It becomes a deal with it right now because once it's dealt with, it's gone. Right?
Oh, man. So what kind of advice can you give, even because I'm going to start trying to do this as well, or other people listening to want to start implementing that? Is it you just jump into it and start deleting, or is there stuff that you kind of had to work at to be good at it, I think?
So actually, the way that I sort of chose to engage with it was there's a woman named Jazz here in New Hampshire who's a home organizer. I was listening to her talk about how she helps people organize their closets at a meeting about a year and a half ago, and she said something that I don't think she realized has haunted me the way that it has. But she had said, when it comes to clothing, what she'll do is she has the people go in their closet and they hang all of their clothes up with the coat hangers going the wrong direction. So you know how typically you put a coat hanger such that the hook, you can place it up over the rod from where you're standing? Yep. If you reverse that coat hanger, it's a nightmare to take that article of clothing down, right? You have to lift and move.
More thinking,
right?
Yep.
So she had said, you hang all your clothes in the wrong direction, and then once or twice a year, anything that still has a coat hanger on the wrong direction, you either donate, throw away, or you pack up if it's seasonal, right? So she mentioned this, and I thought if there's a worse part of me, it's this. Every new idea is stupid until it's not, right? Yeah, right? So I heard her say this, and I'm like, that's stupid. And then I told my wife, and she was like, we should try that. And I'm like, yeah, okay, let's try it. And we tried it, and wouldn't you know it, my closet is now organized and cleaned out. So to answer your question about the emails, I sort of took Jazz's approach, right? Okay. So what I did was I gave myself a starting point. So I started on a Monday. So I left my entire inbox the way it was for everything that was older than that Monday that I started on. And after, say, a month, which is, 4 weeks into doing this, everything that was older than a month, I just deleted all. Wow. Because if I hadn't looked at it, touched it, seen it, needed to deal with it, had it impact whatever else in more than a month, for me, that was a launching off point where, it probably was old enough. Now, I have the added advantage that if, God forbid, I made a mistake, our company server will keep deleted emails forever, right? So I can always go back and grab it. So I just started doing that. And then what I did was, each day, that 1 month or older email, right, was all the way at the top of my inbox because I had emptied everything else out. Wow. And eventually I just got rid of that. So now I'm left in this kind of wonderful situation where, I've got, right now, without looking at it, I can kind of speculate and guess. I probably have 2 or 3 emails from Monday that are still in there because they need action items done. I've got 1 or 2 emails in there from Tuesday. I had a borrower that went under agreement, but they didn't have their paperwork, so that's been sitting there. So I didn't put that in because I need to remember that that's still a thing that's existing, right? We're up against the clock on that offer deadline, and they need to get me things. So, that's still an item that requires my attention, so it's still sitting in my inbox. Yep. But once they get those items in, that contract will get moved into their file, and that email will get deleted, and then it's gone. Yep. So, that was really helpful. The other thing I think, and this goes way back, is for me, and I'm going to shift gears a little back to the networking side of things. For me, it was making myself do the right thing regardless of how it felt in networking. And that was really hard for me.
Gotcha.
But probably ultimately was the thing that benefited me the most. So an example of that was, and again, this goes back to that grass analogy of, seeing the finished product, but not necessarily seeing the work that went into it. Yeah. My first year in BNI, which was really my first real networking event. Again, and I don't mean to cast aspersions. Like, I think there's definitely value in things like chamber and, association networking, things like that. But, chamber for me was, people that wanted a cocktail, that wanted to socialize, and maybe we'll talk about work. BNI was my first endeavor where it was, we are working, and that's what the purpose of this is.
This is work.
Yeah. So, my first, probably first year in BNI, this is super embarrassing, but I would throw up in the morning before. Like, I'd be like in the parking lot puking next to my car with just worry about having to.
You were worse than me,
having to talk in front of a group, primarily because, I joined BNI when I was 23, and I'm doing finance. It's really hard to take a 23-year-old seriously when you're doing finance. So, like, I felt the added weight and pressure of, not only do I need to do a good job, I need to do a good job beyond my age. Yeah. So, for me, it was a lot of throwing up in parking lots. The Manchester School of Mechanical Trades, I owe a big apology to, because there's an awful lot of vomit in the bushes there from 2006 and 2007.
Nothing grows here. Or grows too much here.
I don't understand why this tree keeps dying. But, so I would do that and force myself to do it. And I vividly remember sitting in the parking lot, staring at the building and staring at the door and thinking, I could just go home.
Wow.
Like, if I just leave, no, it's fine. They'll find another lender. It's fine. It's no big deal, blah, blah, blah. But I, forced myself to do those activities. And then that sort of translated into, in the beginning, forcing myself to do the one-to-ones, forcing myself to do the CEs,
exactly.
Forcing myself to get better. For me, I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't getting better. Yeah. So then it became, what are the resources that I need to lean on to get help? And then making myself do that.
Wow.
If you guys are anything like I am, it's difficult for me to ask for help.
Yeah.
It feels like an omission of, or an acknowledgement rather, of an inability for me to do something, and that's a spot that I'm not comfortable with.
Yeah.
But again, the right thing is asking for help, and so I made myself do that, and
absolutely step out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, it sucked. It sucked. I mean, walk up to not a stranger, because I knew who they were, but in our chapter, and being like, "You're better than I am at this. How do I get better?"
Yeah, right.
And in time, finding myself through, honestly, probably luck, and probably hard work, and probably more luck than hard work. But eventually, all of a sudden, I'm realizing that I'm now getting asked, "You're better than me at this. How do I do this?" And then giving back and paying that forward in a way that helps somebody else see success is
that's
awesome.
Crazy. That's crazy to hear, because anybody listening, if you don't know Zach, like when you show up at our groups and you talk, to see that the version of you now, and then to hear about how you used to throw up before.
Oh yeah.
To me, I'm glad you shared that, because people, if I was hearing that when I was starting my business, that would be nice to hear, to know that, oh, okay, I'm a work in progress. I could be like that one day.
Right.
You know what I mean? I could be on the other side. You know what I mean? And I think that's so important for more of us to share and hear, because it lets us know that, all right, man, it's not over. Keep working at it. It will eventually, you will start to see the ROI on your sweat equity that you've been putting in.
100%. And then, if you're looking to shorten that J curve a little bit, the advice that I never got that I really wish I had would be, start with things that you're already passionate about, and then transition them into your work life. That was a light bulb moment for me that I sincerely wish someone had said to me when I was 23. Wow. Here's your shortcut.
Yeah.
And I didn't really realize that shortcut until I was probably in my mid-30s. But again, if you're newer in business, your shortcut, if there is a takeaway from this time together, it would be this: find your shortcut and capitalize on it. So for me, I was when I first joined BNI, I was a rowing coach, and I coached rowing for a number of years, and I was really passionate about that. And I never really thought about how, discipline, hard work, working as a team, following a chain of command, understanding your position within a bigger unit, those things, it didn't occur to me to connect the dots between that and networking.
Yep.
And then, that sort of transitioned into, now I'm a dad. I talk a lot about, being a father, being a husband, as part of my networking, because those are things I'm passionate about. And if someone hears you speak about something passionately, they become interested in that because it's fun to talk about things that people love.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, I just finished that, I think it's The Art of Public Speaking by Dale Carnegie.
Yeah.
He was talking about it, and it's kind of similar to what you just said that stuck with me, when he was like, okay, in the beginning, man, if you're trying to get good at this public speaking stuff, he's like, don't try to last minute cram something and then show up and then they're going to know, you know what I mean? He goes, stick to the stuff that you know, that you're already passionate about, like hobbies, things that you're into. Yeah. And I was like, holy crap. And so once I started doing that in BNI, and I do my 60-second speech or my 10-minute presentations, it's so much easier now, and the passion just oozes out. People say, man, I can tell you're really excited about this thing. I'm like, oh my God, I am. You know what I mean? It's
exactly. Do you remember your presentation with you brought your robot in?
Yeah, dude, I brought a robot in, and I just leaned into it. I'm so passionate about like technology and AI and all that stuff. It's like, I'm going to make electrical contracting exciting because I'm going to bring my personality to it. And I showed up with a robot, man, and I guarantee no one's going to forget that.
So for me, it's like, what I think is really interesting is like, it's fun to talk about things that you're passionate about, like robot being a great example, right? For me, where I find a lot of fun, and this is maybe where like that step 2 of like your networking or public speaking or however you want to paraphrase that. Like, I think maybe step 2 comes in is like when something triggers you in the moment as being like really cool. Mm-hmm. Like, when you hear a thing and you go, that can't be true. And then next you know, it's an hour and a half later and you're like, I've watched a 40-minute documentary.
This is a real thing now.
Whatever, and now it's a real thing. It's a part of my life. That for me is where like the enjoyment, the fun, the spontaneity, for BNI presentations specifically, but also like public speaking and just kind of like work in general, really gets interesting. We talked a moment ago about grass. Yep. Grass is not entertaining. There's a literal expression that says watching the grass grow. Yeah. Like, that's how boring grass is.
But you made it memorable.
But it becomes memorable, right?
Absolutely.
And your jellyfish story.
Am I what?
Yes.
Your jellyfish story.
Yes, I was going to bring that up, dude.
One thing from that chapter, like months ago,
he stole it from me.
I remember is your jellyfish.
He stole
story.
it from me because I was going to say you're absolutely right, because I literally remember your jellyfish story from when you came, and I used a few after that one. My next one, the next Tuesday, I used your tactic, and I think I told something about how like when crabs or like lobsters, right? Like they'll rip their arm off and they'll even piss all over just to prove like who's more dominant. Yeah. And I started my speech out with that, so everybody's like, "Wait, what?" and then I went on with the rest of it,
But there's like something cool about that. Like one of the really interesting things, like so again, like you stumble across something that's like fascinating, right? So like, for example, okay, so like if you're structuring. And not that this is going to be like a TED Talk on structuring a presentation, but like let's say you're going to structure something and you just need something to talk about, right? For me, I have a note section in my phone of just like interesting factoids.
Yes.
Because it's fun to build something around a factoid. Now, this is not something that if you've never presented before, this is not something where you watch a YouTube short with a factoid and now you're ready to give a 30-minute presentation. This comes with practice, which again, I say that primarily because I think oftentimes when we as business owners or just as people in general hear this comes in time or it comes with practice, you think, well, I'm not going to put the energy or effort into developing that skill, which is unfortunate because it fails then to provide you with this amazing opportunity to like better yourself. So I'm going to tell you this comes with a little bit of practice, but I learned this the other day that crocodiles basically don't die of old age. Now, in and of itself, that doesn't really mean anything, right?
I know, I'm like, what is that? What?
But that means that when explorers first showed up here, you got Ponce de Leon looking for the Fountain of Youth and whatever else. They probably saw like 30-foot crocodiles because crocodiles live forever, right?
Yeah,
which means
right,
we don't get to experience that now. So that's a cool little factoid, cool and neat thing. That's why it resonated with me, right? Then the next step is like, okay, well, so what does that mean for work? Or how do we make that business related, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So for me, I start drawing lines of connection, right? So, okay, so something that never dies. So what never dies? Ideas never die. Words never die. Okay, that's kind of dull. Your business.
Yeah, your legacy, right?
Your legacy. There we go. Okay, so legacy. So now the conversation is legacy. So how big your legacy gets depends on how long you're doing it, right? How impactful your networking experience is based on how much time you have, right? Yeah. So you start building this idea around, something. Okay, so then where my brain naturally goes then is, why don't we have 30-foot crocodiles anymore? Or alligators. I said crocodiles, I meant alligators, right?
Yeah.
The reason is guns. Guys showed up and they were getting eaten by crocodiles and alligators and stuff in Florida while they're trying to find the Fountain of Youth. They started shooting these guys, and they're sending back pelts and everything else, and then all of a sudden there's this market exploded.
Right.
And there's this industry, and the industry sort of undermined the beauty and wonder and majesty of these critters. Okay,
Wow.
so now we're kind of going down that path, and then it's like, all right, so how do we structure that in a way that becomes a memorable story? Now, I haven't gotten there yet because I don't know what that story is going to be, but like that's
I see where
like
you're going
where
with
my
this,
brain
though.
goes, right? So you got like legacy, you've got time, you've got energy, you've got effort. Okay, so now let's put this all together. So for me, if we're going to be talking about, say culture in a chapter, culture in a network, culture in a company, for me it becomes a matter of, we start things off kind of silly. Do you guys know alligators don't die of old age? Which, by the way, full disclosure, I don't know if that's actually true. It was on a podcast I was listening to. This could all be BS, but it doesn't really matter. And then, you get like some eyes that like kind of look at you and like, why are we talking about alligators? And it's like, well, here's the thing. And then we tell a little story about alligators and then how we relate that to our chapter and our culture or our business and our culture, about how that cultural aspect is the thing that can grow forever because it doesn't die unless we implement something new that kills it or lessens it or undermines it or defeats it or takes away the thing that was feeding it.
Wow.
And that's how we sort of structure these stories around things that are interesting to us. Now, I had given a, talk I think actually it might have been last time I was at your chapter. We talked about, pistol shrimp. We were talking about those things, right?
Yep.
So on the surface, pistol shrimp are just another shrimp in the sea, right? But they're cool to me. You guys probably don't care about shrimp. Nobody in the room probably cares about shrimp, but it's interesting. And so there's a certain element of intrinsic curiosity that a group is going to have when you're passionate about something, even if they're not in the beginning, if you can speak to it in a way that shows why you're passionate. Like I talk a lot about Star Wars.
Yeah. You're able to find ways to bridge it.
Yeah.
And
and that's where the practice and the skill comes in. And sometimes it's simply a matter of being like, dude, I got this idea about, the hierarchy of social structures of lobsters.
Wow.
Let's talk about it and see if we can find a way to make it work.
Wow. Yeah.
Like it's crazy.
Wow. I mean, it kind of reminds me a little bit what I do in the group where I brand myself as the doctor electrician. Like I'll even bring in a stethoscope. You know what I mean? I'll relate to your home as like the body and organs and stuff. And I try to, like I said, decommoditize myself. But now I'm going to start getting that list of interesting facts and animals, and I'm going to start brainstorming, man, how to bring that in, catch their attention, and then relate it,
It's all about context. And your storytelling develops context. So for example, like this, I don't know why this always registers with me, but it just does, right? So there's this scene in Empire Strikes Back, which is for those of you who don't know, it's episode 5 of Star Wars. There's a scene in there where, spoiler alert, the movie came out in the 70s or early 80s. So, like, if you haven't seen it yet, go out and see it. So, pause the podcast now if you don't want spoilers about a 40-year-old movie.
Right,
but okay.
Don't get mad at us, bro.
Don't get mad at us. You've been fully warned. But, spoiler alert. So, you got, you're in the Cloud City of Vesper, and Vader and Luke are fighting, and there's this whole big reveal that Darth Vader is Luke's father. And it's like, on the surface, it's like we've spent 5 hours together experiencing what a nightmare dad actually is and how awful he is and how this boy's search for a larger meaning to his life has ultimately led to him encountering his dad. Like there's more to it, right? The context of that matters. Because if you said to somebody like, hey, I gasped in the movie theater because a dude told another dude that he was his dad, you'd be like, all right.
You're like, okay, you got to get out more, right?
But then you give it context and it matters, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. No, so man, there's so many like cuts. Like I like to go to these after, and once he's finished doing the full, and I like to break them into like little bite-sized nuggets. You know what I mean? Because you never know, all those little bit of advices that you were giving that could come on someone's algorithm somewhere and be that changing thing. Like it's done for me many times.
Because you've heard that one thing that you held on to.
Absolutely. And I started implementing it because what I love about all these is like the theme I've been noticing is like, we're all a work in progress.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if you can even take a few things from this
100%.
episode, you know what I mean? That would be amazing. And then come back to it again. I know I'm going to come back. It's hard to keep track of everything you said today. So I'm going to come back and listen again and start implementing a lot of stuff that I heard. And I hope other people listening too can do the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point.
And if you're struggling with networking, I mean, the best advice is just get after it.
Yeah.
Like just like remind yourself that the seeds you're planting today through both your successes and failures as you're out networking are the things that grow into a harvestable yield down the road.
Absolutely.
And don't be afraid to not be good at networking.
Right.
Again, if it helps, I would consider myself probably to be an above average networker at this point. I wouldn't go so far as to say I'm good or great at it, but I'm above average, I think. But it started for me from puking in parking lots because I was so afraid to talk in front of a group of people who, by the way, just as a reminder, want me there, are interested in what I have to say.
Yeah, you got to remind yourself, right?
And
they want you there.
And are glad to see me. And even in that room, I'm popping Wrigley's chewing gum in my mouth before I walk in to make sure I don't have vomit breath.
Man.
It went from that to where I am today because of, I guess, again, just an unending series of I got to keep trying.
Yeah, almost like a ferocious, just always trying to improve, right?
Yeah.
Heck yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, I almost had, and I don't know if this is self-fulfilling prophecy or not, but it was almost like you were saying, Zach, people who want me there, people who are interested in me. Mm-hmm. In the beginning of it would be like that was a killer for me. I don't want them to be interested in me. I don't want them to notice me.
Yeah.
I just want to be the guy in the back that nobody pays attention to. That I give my one little 60-second, at the end of or during your sales manager minute. That was my first experience at BNI. It was scary. It was terrifying.
There's a certain safety net that comes in with that, though, almost like on the other side of it. So I'm sure you guys all have that guy friend or that girlfriend that dates the train wreck, right?
Oh, yeah.
And they keep going back to the train wreck. And why do they do that, right? The reason that I think on some level they do that is...
Or kids.
If you're... Or
kids that date the train wreck,
right.
Yep.
But on some level, it's like, if you know why it's not going to work out on day one, you're not surprised when it doesn't work out a year from now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's an element of that when it comes to networking where it's like to your point, I don't want these guys to like what I have to say. I don't want them to find me engaging because if they do, that means they like me. And if they like me and this doesn't work, it's going to hurt that much worse.
Yeah.
Don't date the train wreck in networking, right?
Yeah.
Find the good one that you can commit to. And if it doesn't work, it's going to hurt. But you know what? If it doesn't work, there's a lot of networking groups.
Oh, bro, yeah. Seriously. I go visit so many BNI groups all the time. I literally wanted to just grow my network more in Boston.
Yeah.
So what I do, I just went and I looked up and I found chapters and I went in there and I reached out to them and I got their approval. And then all of a sudden, like you said, planting the seeds, I spent like 2 months doing that. And it was exhausting, but I knew it was worth it. And I was very intentional. Like you said, I wasn't trying to date the train wrecks.
Yeah.
When I went to these places, I was very intentional on who I was talking to, and before I went into it, every time I would go into these BNI groups, I'm like, all right, who can I help today? Who can I help this morning? Bro, 2 months later, all kinds of leads started coming. It's insane.
Do you ever catch yourself making the excuse about networking that you did it even though you know you didn't really do it? Because this for me in the beginning was a big thing that I saw as a win that I now reflect back on as a loss. And what I mean by that is I would get invited to go visit another BNI chapter, right? And that's work. Like a BNI chapter is real work.
Yeah.
You got to be prepared. You got to go in. You're on. You've got scripting. You've got it's work. And then a chapter event is more social. Which again, I close loans out of chapter events all the time. Like I'm a big advocate of going to chapters, going to chamber events. But it's not work in the same way because you don't know what you're walking into. And so for me, a lot of it would be instead of visiting that second chapter for BNI in a given week, it would be I would do the after hours social for Manchester Young Professionals where I go and I walk around the room once and I say hi to the 3 people that I know in the room and then I leave. And it's I left feeling good. I did a networking event today. That's 3 this week. I'm crushing it. I'm doing a great job.
Checking a box off.
But I was just checking off the box.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Giving myself the out for not really hustling.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I chose the word intentional because it's I'm not going to just go talk to everybody. Obviously, I'm going to talk to people if I'm going to be cordial and talking to everybody. But, I am here to make connections and, like I said, try to help people and be very intentional. And I don't know, ever since I've been doing that, like I said, we don't pay for advertising. It's just social media. meeting up, building those relationships, and then just planting the seeds, man. And it's just been amazing, and the business has just been thriving just because of just that intentionality.
It's funny, the word like being intentional is one of those things that like I wrestle with a little bit, because I feel like that's become such a buzzword that people throw out when they don't really mean it.
Well, I think it has to come down to what is your definition of intentional. Like I throw it out there, and if you were to ask me, I could give you my breakdown of it. But I think, I guess, just to clarify, it's one of those things where, like, make that word whatever it means to you.
Yeah, 100%.
You know what I mean? So you are right. It is a buzzword, so I'm glad you brought that up, because it is important to define it for yourself.
But I think you're using it the right way. Like, I feel like you hear this a lot where it's like I'm going to be intentional today. And it's like, all right, well, what is that? What does that mean?
Exactly, right.
Like, what does it mean to be intentional? And for me, I think it harkens back to that point of, like, not doing the easy thing, but doing the right thing, even if it's scary. That for me is what for me personally, that's being intentional means this is the correct thing to do, therefore I'm going to do it.
Yes, exactly. I'm really big on where I focus my energy and my time as well too, so I'm really also big on affirmations. And so part of that is, it's like, all right, they change for me almost sometimes daily, not all of them, but some of them. It's like, all right, like, what am I going to try to achieve today?
What do you do to celebrate affirmations?
So I'm real big on like it could be a number of things. It could be like the other day I was able to close a deal I've been trying to do for a while, and I was telling myself that whole week I really wanted to get this person to see my side of the view. I want to bring them to my side. So when I did at the end of the week, I was like, I just want to be with my kids. You know what I mean? So as soon as I came home early, and then we went out to a diner, and then we went to like a park and stuff like that. And we just hung out, and I don't know, I just felt really good, and I wanted to celebrate that with my fam, because that's what I'm doing it for.
Yeah. Let me ask a question a slightly different way. So there are times as a business owner that I think we feel guilty about celebrating. Right, or we feel like we're bragging for no reason. But,
I see what you're
but it's
saying.
important. So as an example, and this is a silly example, but it's a great example.
Okay.
When my son was a year old, right, he's standing wobbly next to the coffee table, and he takes 3 steps and then falls on his butt. And I scoop him up and I put him back next to the coffee table, and I grab my phone and I FaceTime my mother, right, and we're watching him take 3 more steps before he falls down. Like, mom's crying, she's so excited. My wife's crying, she's so excited. My son has taken his first step. As a 40-something-year-old man now, if I FaceTimed my mother to watch her, to watch my son take 3 steps, it wouldn't, it doesn't resonate, right? Because the context doesn't matter. It's like the first time, or it's a big deal, or it hasn't happened, or whatever else, right? So celebrating those small victories is all about kind of where you're at in your journey. So as business owners, there are some of us that still want that recognition for taking those steps, and there's some of us that would get laughed at if we bragged about taking steps. There's that where you are in your growth and where you are in development that is sometimes lost on the outside observer, because they don't know that is a big deal. So my question, I guess maybe
you just made me realize a bunch
better
of stuff.
asked is like, how do you celebrate small victories? Another example of this is, so I'm in recovery. I quit drinking a number of years ago, and I do a lot of work with recovery centers and things like that. I do a lot of speaking engagements with them, and we talk a lot about this in early recovery for small victories, because to a drug addict or an alcoholic driving by a liquor store is a big deal, right? To somebody who has a gambling addiction, getting past exit 20 on 93 where the Encore Casino is, like that's a big deal, right?
Yeah, that's got to be tough.
Whereas to people that don't have that addiction, the liquor store is just another building you drove by.
Nothing,
the bar is just another restaurant that you don't even think about because you don't like the chicken wings or whatever it happens to be. So one of the things we talk a lot about in early addiction is making sure that you're communicating to your support system and your support network when you've experienced one of these small wins, and understanding that it doesn't mean that you're getting, a parade because you didn't go to the liquor store, but it does mean that you need to acknowledge those wins so that other people understand the important aspects of your development. In business, I think we are often conditioned to not celebrate our small wins. So
dude, you're 100% right.
You had said
totally
before,
get what you're saying now.
Looking for affirmations for me is different than celebrating affirmations.
Yeah. Like, I tell my affirmations myself, but I see what you're saying, because I had this problem in the beginning where because of my background, I always felt like anything that good happened to me in my adult life, I would have that survivor's guilt, where it's like, like I have other family and friends that they also came from where I came from, and they're also still suffering. Like,
Yep.
why do I deserve this? So I would not tell anybody anything that I did good, even my own wife, nobody, because I always felt like I'd be ashamed for it or I felt guilty.
It's like the winner's guilt.
Yeah.
Right?
So you just made me think a lot of that. Yeah. So now I still deal with it a lot, but I tell my wife every now and then, but I still feel guilty. Hey, I did this thing today and I feel bad. I'm like, ugh,
so this
gross.
is a big networking thing that is helpful, I think, especially in early networking, is that celebration of small victories in a way that is not braggadocious.
I'm so afraid of that, man.
And I think it's a very real thing. But here's where networking really benefits you in that regard. Is like it's one thing for me to say to you, like, hey, I'm nipping at the heels of being top 1% in my industry. Like, I'm real close. If I can just get a couple more deals, I'm real close.
Yeah.
That's very different than you saying to someone, my boy Zach is my mortgage guy. He's awesome. He's so good. He's actually approaching that top 1% this year. It feels different. Right? So where I'm going with that is like, my ability to share with you my small wins gives you information that is actionable in the real world to help you find me business. And that's and again, that's one of those things that I think we as business owners, I think, are conditioned and taught, like, doing your job is its own reward. You don't have to brag about doing your job.
Right.
But you should.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, man. I suffer with that still, but
I do too.
I'm going to try to work on that to try to, at least highlight those things to the group, because you can ask them. I don't really talk about that stuff, you know what I mean? Because I always feel nervous that I'm bragging or I feel gross, So,
that was a big change for me, though, like
a
big shift, like in my networking. I'm going to call it career, for lack of a more accurate expression, but me getting myself away from the idea of me bragging in this room is me bragging, right? But it doesn't have to be. It's me sharing small victories, small wins, goals that I have that I've accomplished. It gives them information necessary to talk about me in a way that is more marketable.
Wow. Yeah. No, I got to get comfortable with that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think so. One thing that I learned recently that I struggled with for a very, very long time, right? Well, so when you're first starting out as a business, like, you're figuring out your pricing and stuff like that, right? And so I recently learned that, again, don't be a little and stop devaluing yourself.
Yeah, know your worth. Remember that we talked about?
And so I've been networking with another photographer from another chapter, Derek. He's amazing. And when I learned what his prices were compared to what my prices were, I said, holy crap, I'm devaluing myself to the point, like, charging way far less, but I'm also devaluing the market itself. Other photographers, I'm giving other photographers a bad name because I'm charging so low.
Because you don't know how to charge, you don't know overhead, all that stuff.
Right, exactly.
It's a race to the bottom.
Also, like, if you're establishing a paradigm that, like, your services are worth X number of dollars and everyone else is charging a higher level, you're in a weird way inserting in the mind of the consumer that the appropriate value for a job well done is less than what it should be.
Correct.
Yep, 100%.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Correct. Yeah, and so we just went through and we just restructured all of our pricing and all that stuff. And, before my prices that I have now, before I would have been scared crapless to send this stuff out. Now I'm like, here's my price.
I remember the first time, when we helped you with, when you first started doing that, way back with that, I think that drone job, right?
Yeah, the solar panel thing.
Yeah, you were going to charge like $1,000 or something like that. What did you end up sending it for? Like $13,000, $15,000 or something?
It's like 15 grand.
Yeah, and then you got it, remember? And you were like, no, there's no way, and all this crap. It's like, no, dude, you crunch the numbers, it's real, you are worth that amount, and then you got the job, like, that was crazy.
Well, that's like that big commercial job that we just put out. We just sent out a $19,000 estimate.
Sick.
That's awesome, brother.
Great.
And I was I kept looking at my wife, and I'm like, do I do it? She's like, do the numbers make sense? It's like, yeah, of course. Well, then send it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
And off it goes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, it's not really about the price for me and a lot of our clients, because we spend so much time getting to know them, getting to know their motives, everything, peeling back the onions. When we get down to that price, it's like, yeah, of course, let's just do it, man. I've already trust you wholeheartedly. You've asked all the right questions, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and you deliver it with confidence.
See, mine sort of straddles those two lines, right? Where, like, I have to be competitive on price because ultimately that's what matters. But but there's, like, a service level that goes in where I find, like, it's interesting. Like, I had this conversation with like one of my best friends ever is this guy named Jason, who's a real estate agent over at EXP Realty. And he and I were having this conversation the other day, and we were talking about how, on on like my side of things, the value proposition happens before the price conversation happens. Meaning, like, I will spend in this market potentially years, but very often months with a client, like the 8 p.m. Sunday night phone calls, the 6:30 a.m. pre-work check-ins, like there's all this that goes into this like pre-offer education process and getting them on board with kind of what's going on in the market and how to position themselves successfully and all that. There's so much of that goes in, and then in the 11th hour, it's like, okay, you're under agreement, we're good, your contract's satisfied. Here your home inspection is done. Like, you guys are ready to go. Like, all we have to do is just dot the I's and cross the T's, and you guys will be homeowners. And that's when the price conversation happens. And for me, like, where the struggle is it feels very shitty as a person to be like, hey man, we're not the lowest rate right now. But it's because I was able to work with you at 9 o'clock on a Friday. Like, where was this discount lender at 9 o'clock on a Friday? He wasn't there. And being able to find a way to have that conversation that feels empowering to the borrower as far as getting to where you're at now because of the work we put in, is probably the one area in my business that I think I struggle with the most, because it just feels so disingenuous, even though it's not.
Right. Yeah, man. It's like the way you described it almost sounds like you're like running a marathon with the person too. To the finish line. You're like with them, and you're like.
Well, I think a good lender does, and unfortunately, bad lenders can afford to charge less because they're not putting in the energy, effort, work. It's not there. It's funny. I had this happen the other day that was one of the most validating things that's happened to me in 2024. Is I had a consumer that had made a bunch of offers, and they ended up shifting over to me as a lender because their agent had said, we need to change some things because our offers are not getting accepted. Let's have you talk to Zach and see if we can structure things a little different way. And so we put things together, and as it turns out, one of the houses they found this offer on was with an agent that knew me. So when they put their offer in, they weren't the highest offer, but they were the strongest offer, and part of the strength of that offer was me as the lender. So the listing agent, who has the house for sale, picks up the phone and calls me and says, hey, I just want to make sure these people are good. And I go, yeah, they're great, they're good. They're new clients of mine. They've been very unsuccessful with offers in the past because they were using a discount lender here, a discount lender there. And we actually got the offer in part because of that agent's relationship with me and the fact that she could communicate to her sellers that not only is this guy giving us a pre-approval letter, but I know he'll get us to the finish line. It was one of the most validating things that's happened in a long time for me.
And I love what you said was that you weren't, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said you weren't the highest, but you were the strongest offer.
Yeah.
I like that. The strongest. Like, doesn't matter about being the highest or lowest. What's the strongest freaking offer you got?
Well, and that's a big part of, like, it's interesting. In all of our jobs, there's what I call like the cornerstone conversation, right? So, like, for a lot of us, it's price. In a lot of industries, it's price, right? In others, it's more of like a Coke and Pepsi type conversation. Of like there's a preference, right? Like Coke and Pepsi are basically the same. You see people fail that Coke versus Pepsi taste test challenge all the time. Fun side note. I feel like every person you ever talk to in the world is like, I can totally tell the difference between Coke and Pepsi. And I have watched dozens of people. I have this old boss named Jimmy who is like one of the greatest bosses I've ever had in my life, and just like a genuinely fun, engaging guy. And he actually put a group of our loan officers through the Coke and Pepsi challenge, and every person failed it. But if you talk to anybody, they instantly believe it, right? Anyway, so you have the price conversation, you have the whatever else. But it's like, the what goes into that price conversation is one that I think we as business owners, stray away from. And I don't know that we should. Like, again, full disclosure, I'm terrible at this. But I don't know that we should. Because, I part of me feels like if I was working with someone, buying a widget, right? And I've got, Bob on one side and Derek on the other side. And I've got Bob saying, here's all the things I'm going to do for you. And Derek saying, I'm really cheap. Like, I think I naturally gravitate towards really cheap because I feel like I can probably solve a lot of problems that come up because I have a undiagnosed, self-absorbed complex of narcissism and self-belief. But
I was going to say, as an entrepreneur, I think I have like this false confidence because earlier I was like, real quick, I was like, oh yeah, I can tell the difference between Pepsi and Coke.
Yeah, of course. And everyone does. By the way, I, as someone who have failed the Pepsi challenge, I still
and you're still like,
when I'm still, it's still when I'm like, hey, can I have a Coke? And like, we have Pepsi. I'm always like,
you're like, yeah.
Even though
it doesn't matter.
If they hadn't said anything,
that's hilarious.
I would totally just have drank the Pepsi and thought it was Coke.
Gosh, that's
but
funny.
Anyway, I don't know that we should necessarily stray away from that. Here's the value I provide. So that's something that I'm working on right now in my own business, and I'm trying to figure out a way to like do that in a way that feels like confrontational is too strong a word for it, but it feels less salesy. So something I come up with, this is actually a new thing I've implemented in my business that I'm pretty happy with, is I've put together a bio sheet for me and my team. And it's a thing that goes out with the pre-approved letter and goes out to potential new buyer clients. And it goes through, you know, like what my team does, where areas of specialty are, accolades, where you can find us online, reviews. But then there's a section on there that talks about work-life balance.
Okay. Is this a one-sheeter?
Yeah, it's just one-sheeter.
Okay,
Yeah,
nice.
But it's great. But it's got like a little pie graph on there with like how I divide my time up with, you know, like charity work and skill building and work and home life and hobbies and that. And I included it on there. And it's funny because I got absolutely dumped on when I showed this to my coworker. Because he was like, dude, he goes, you were wasting space and a marketing material to show them that you do charity work and spend time with your son and wife.
Wow, you thought that was a waste of time?
Just because it's space on the sheet that maybe could have been better used for something that was more actionable.
I see.
Right?
Gotcha.
I will tell you the only thing I get feedback on that sheet, the only thing, is that stupid little pie graph on the bottom.
Wow. People really appreciate that.
Well, they do, because it's like it humanizes you.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It tells a story about who you are.
That's a better way of putting it. Yes,
I know me, I would be less nervous because if I'm meeting up with you, if I saw that, I'd be like, oh, I got a bunch of stuff I can talk to him about. Like, holy crap, I feel like I know the guy now, right? I like that, dude. I wonder if I could do something like that in the biz.
In my former role, you should.
Yeah.
In my former role, we were taught how to come up with what was called the one-page profile, which is basically essentially the exact same thing.
Yeah.
How I want to be supported. You know, it was a little bit different, but it was like how I want to be supported, what my interests are, what my hobbies are, my hope, my dreams, my aspirations. But
I like that.
it was a sheet that we would hang out outside of our cubicle cells. So our supervisors, when they walked by it, they would see how I want to be supported. And it was basically, I want you to leave me the hell alone. Let me do. If I need help, I'll come and see you. But like, that's a great idea, kind of to send out. And my so for my son, through his elementary and middle school, now my son has a disability, and one of the things that I did was I made a one-page profile for him.
Smart.
And it was hopes, dreams, hobbies, interests, then how I want to be supported.
Nice.
And that carries with him every single year now. Of course, we have to update it now that he's 14. But at each of our yearly meetings, we would sit down and I would say, did you read his one-page profile? Well, no. Well, go back and read it. Don't just read his file. Go back and read his one-page profile. Then you'll truly understand my son.
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
Yeah, it's that insight into you as an individual. You know, and again, part of it is, you know, there are blessings and curses to the world that we live in post-COVID. One of those curses, I think, is that the face-to-face interaction on the sales side of things got greatly diminished. You know, it's funny, like pre-COVID, I could probably count on one hand the number of customers that I hadn't met in person prior to closing, and now, I mean, it's extremely common for me to walk into a closing room and it's the first time that I've seen them face-to-face. Half the time, unless I got driver's licenses for them for a particular reason on like the upfront piece of it, I oftentimes don't even know what they look like. Wow,
that's crazy, man. And I think that's a huge impact on that rapport that you're trying to build.
It is, which was part of like kind of the reasoning behind doing that one sheet was it became clear to me that if they didn't know me, I was another lender. If they knew me, I became Zach.
Exactly.
Right? And that one sheet was sort of my initial foray into establishing me as an individual instead of me as a position within an organization. So.
Yeah, my takeaway from it was you said you were humanizing.
Yeah.
You know, and if you remember, that was one of the first things you said when you joined our BNI group. You're like, I want to humanize my business, and that's one thing that got me connected. I was like, I got to go talk to that guy because he clearly thinks the same way like that I'm thinking too. Because I try to do the same thing with our electrical business, man. Everybody thinks of us as like these knuckleheads and this and that. It's like, nah, man, we're a lot more than that.
Right.
You know, like we can talk. You know, and it's all about humanizing. And that's why we're big on the social media. Like I'm so big on putting what makes us special on there, because a lot of our customers, and particularly what we do, is they follow us for a long time. They think about this stuff for months, sometimes a year, and then they'll finally call us. Yeah, we've been thinking about doing battery or this, and we've been seeing you guys for like almost like a year now. And now when we finally were able to make the decision, we know we want to go with you guys because we've been watching you guys for forever.
Right.
And we love your guys' joke and all your videos and stuff, and so they feel like they know us when we show up to their house. Like,
because you stop being what you do and start being who you are.
Oh, I lean into it hard. Now, I used to try to be so like protective of that. I'm like, nope, this is what... you only have to hear it so many times where people say, I bought because I like you, Edward. Like, you know, so I'm like, all right, I should put more of that in our business, and man, it's been helping so much.
It's being pretentious, but being pretentious in a positive and productive way.
Oh yeah,
Pretentious with a purpose.
with a purpose.
Pretentious with a purpose.
So
Absolutely.
one of my big fumbles, I think, earlier on in my career for sure was I remember I was sitting down having lunch with a real estate agent, and it was somebody that I had worked with for quite a while. And I had said to her, she made a comment, something along the lines of, and I'm butchering this, but something along the lines of like, we're not there yet, meaning her and a client, like we're not there yet, but they really like me. And I remember thinking about that, and I just sort of just blurted it out without processing all the way, which is never a good thing. I blurted out, I go, is it important that your customers like you? And she goes, yeah, it's like the most important thing. And I remember saying to her, I don't know that I think that it is, because I would rather have a customer tell his friend at a barbecue, we closed on the house and Zach was okay, instead of saying, we really like Zach and we're still renting.
Yeah, right.
And for a long time, my mindset was
point.
that, right?
Yeah,
My mindset was that
point.
for a long time. And what I realized was you can't look at that duplexically. Like it can't be one or the other, right? Those two things need to live in a Venn diagram of your clients need to like you, because that's what keeps them with you when things go poorly.
Yep. Yeah, they'll drop you real quick, right, if you're on the fence.
Right.
Like,
If they're on the fence, or they get a better offer, or it's just not going well, or they need to change, like, I call it geographic rehabilitation, meaning like if we can change our landscape, things will be better. I think a lot of people feel that way, right? So on our side of things, like on the lending world, it's, if you're out there looking with your realtor at 30 houses and you can't come on an agreement, like at some point the client is probably going to at least entertain the idea of, maybe we should find a new lender, maybe we should find a new realtor, maybe we should find this, maybe we should find that. Yeah. So the liking you stops that conversation from happening, because again, it's not your fault, but if they're going to change something, they can't change themselves. The only other players involved are you.
That's true.
So it keeps them a little sticky. The other side of that is doing your job really well.
Yeah.
Should be a minimum standard.
Hell yeah. I heard someone say, well, we're licensed, we're this. I'm like, that's a duh moment. Like, I would expect you to be licensed. Right. I would expect you to be professional. To me, that's like minimum entry.
Right.
What are you doing beyond that? Like, what separates you from the rest? Because I guarantee you, I got a lot more to bring to the table than just that bare minimum stuff.
And that's where that humanizing thing comes in, right? Again, like, but the funny thing is, like, this is one of the things that, like, this is something I noticed a couple years ago that I'm trying to figure out, like, why this happens or how this happened. But it's like the idea of you doing something that everyone else can do becoming a brag. So
right,
so to your point, right? You get the contractor that says, well, we're licensed, and it's like, well, how did the minimum standard for your occupation become the thing you brag about?
Exactly.
On our side, it's like, hey, we get loans closed. Yeah, you and everybody else. You wouldn't be in business if you didn't get loans. Like, how does that become the brag?
Absolutely, exactly.
I don't know. It's interesting, but that's becoming a thing now, and I'm wondering if that has to do more with our shift on the consumer side from a perception standpoint of getting us more into that, us as a person instead of us as an occupation, has shifted the intrinsic value they perceive away from a job well done to a person I like.
Yeah.
And then how do you maintain that focus in their eyes on the quality of the outcome of the product that I produce is really the important thing. You liking me is an added bonus.
It's almost like with technology and the internet, everything becoming more prominent, these things we're talking about, they feel like just old school business methods that like they need to bring back even more with how disconnected we are. Like you said, you have clients where you see them to almost the very end.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where I feel like that face-to-face, the handshakes, you know what I mean? I don't know, I just feel like that helps bridge all this that disconnects us. You know what I mean? I don't know. I just feel like there's something there that I try to practice all the time, and that's the big one that always helps me. You know what I mean? Is showing up and really putting all my attention into our people, our clients. I always tell them, like, I'm always gonna tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. You know what I mean? Like, I want to be like this advisory for you. You know what I mean? Call me. We can talk. Like they always say, we're an attention economy. You know what I mean? And so I'm like, all right, like, what do I kind of keep doing to keep your trust? Like you said, you like me even in the hard times. You're going to stick around with us during that, you know? So that's been my main focus. And I think, I don't know, maybe it was because, and again, I know it's not everybody, but some of the people I talk to who've been doing business for 30, 40 years, it almost seems like it was a little bit, like, I don't know, it was like harder the key. I'm having a hard time phrasing it, but it was almost easier to like do business in the sense that like you didn't have to fight so much for their trust. It was like if you're the only thing in town, that's all they had to buy.
There's more noise now.
Way more noise.
There's more noise because if you think about it, like, after we leave here, I'm gonna get in the truck. I'm gonna turn the radio on, right? And there's commercials, which 40 years ago there was commercials on the radio too, right? So you have that noise, and not that it's hyper likely to happen, but you have a client come in, you do a consult with them, they walk out, and the first commercial they hear on the radio could be for an electrician or something, right? In your world. Now, unlikely, but it might happen, right? But now the problem is, like, with the way smartphones and everything operate, it's like between Amazon recommending products and YouTube recommending videos and all that, we're in this world now where simply by the actions our consumers are taking, media is then putting things in front of them that undermine our credibility.
Exactly.
And there's a level of noise that comes from that becomes now our new responsibility to overcome, which is amazingly frustrating. On my side of things, it's like, I have a customer fill out an application, and like just by that activity online, Google and whatever else recognizes that they logged into a lending portal, and now their Google ads that pop up when they search, or their YouTube algorithm or whatever else is now putting in, the idiot from California that's never closed a loan that has the video that's like, call me today because I'm the mortgage mastermind and I'll save you money.
Oh, even as a videographer, like, so Edward knows this, but editing is like one of the biggest bane of my existence. But like even and I'm learning how to edit and stuff like that. I have a couple of outsourced stuff that I can. But anyways, even like going on to my Instagram account or my Facebook account, like you see these videos of like, are you a videographer? Do you want to learn how to edit and super fast so you don't have to do anything except upload the video? Right. It's like, dude, again, what the are you trying to sell?
Right.
Yeah. What kind of a product are you?
Right.
Yeah. You know what I mean? It just there's so much noise. And so like I've had clients who have called me and they said, well, we're really weary about somebody who can do social media management and stuff like that because we've bought into this kind of a service before and they've had a horrible experience.
Yep.
And that gets into that, you can always do less, you can always do worse for less.
Yeah.
Right.
There's one of the things that
you get what you pay for.
Yeah, you do, and you're also busy creating the outcome that you deserve.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times people will take that discount route. Now, having said that, there is a place for that, right?
Of course,
there is a place for that. You get somebody who's, like in your world, right? You have somebody who is by trade a low voltage wiring specialist.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, we work with them all the time.
Right.
Yep. But
the question is, could they probably do your job to a lesser degree in their own home for free?
Exactly. That's like that mentality.
Probably, right?
Yep.
But is there an intrinsic risk they're taking on by doing that? Yes, 100%. There is. The smart consumer, the savvy consumer, the consumer that cares about long-term strategy, goals, vision, protection, et cetera, they are going to do the cost-benefit analysis in their head and realize that it is significantly less expensive from a number of non-monetary standpoints to hire the expert to do it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Conversely, on my side, it's like, could someone spend 40 hours a week surfing online portals and find a program or a product that's a real niche that they could fit into that's going to accomplish their goal? Sure, they could. But a intelligent consumer and one that recognizes the value of what is being provided to them is going to look at that and go, why on earth do I want to spend all of this time doing X, Y, and Z when I can hire Zach?
Yep, that's more and more of our customers, by the way, ever since I started the niche. And the stuff we do is very complicated. And what I started to notice when we started getting a little bit of them, when we were doing a little bit of everything, was I was like, man, I really like talking to these particular people because they did exactly what you said. It wasn't always necessarily about the money. It was about the investment they're making and their ROI. And there was a lot of these more important, higher things that they were concerned with than just how much does it cost and this and that. They really wanted to make sure that this is something that, for one, we're in a relationship long term, and then with how new this stuff is, they want to make sure whatever's getting put in is being supported for like a long time. And with all the chaos, everybody's trying to jump in on it. And with us, we've been steadily being the experts on it for the last few years now. So when all that noise, when they look us up, we're the only ones who show up, and we're the only ones that are consistent. So we immediately build that trust, and that's when we start getting those people who stick to us like glue.
Yeah, it's like with us, like with New Horizon, we're trying to kind of send the message now that we are the contractor's photographer. That's our message now, instead of having all other photographers, and this isn't a discredit to other photographers, but when you say branding photography, but that's kind of a broad expression. What does that mean?
Right.
You know, are you a lifestyle branding photographer? Are you a product branding photographer or videographer? So that's why we're trying to niche down too as well and say we are. As a matter of fact, I've made that a part of my 60-second sales minute is New Horizon. We are the contractor's photographer.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of this gets back to again, like I said before, everything's a blessing and a curse, right? The blessing and curse of like the YouTube, the Google, the algorithm, all that stuff is that you get more noise. The blessing in that for sure is that I think generally speaking, I think you have a more savvy, better educated consumer in the marketplace now than you did, say, 10 years ago. Where I think that helps you, there's a lot of ways that hurts you, right? And when I say hurt you, I want to be very clear in that. I do not mean that being a well-educated consumer means that you're harder to take advantage of or that you're harder to charge a market rate for things. I do not mean that. So when I say more difficult, I don't mean from the standpoint of closing the sale.
Exactly.
I mean from like the operational standpoint of getting your consumer from their inception point to the finish line.
Yeah.
Where I think that potentially becomes, a blessing is that because you've got a higher level of consumer kind of access to information and you've got a better educated and more savvy consumer, I think the unintended benefit of that's really surfaced is this idea of you having a niche doesn't mean that is the thing you do.
Exactly.
I think the perception of that has changed where, so for example, for me, I have a designation called CDLP, which is Certified Divorce Loan Planner.
Okay.
As of the recording of this, I'm the only one in the state that has that designation, right? It's a challenging designation to get. It requires a lot to get it. So that means that, when I'm having conversations with, family law attorneys, for example, I can tell them that, that's a niche that I hold that I hold very valuably because it's, a very difficult thing to obtain.
Yep.
Where that more savvy consumer and more savvy referral source side of things factors in a positive way is they don't hear that and think the only thing Zach does is divorce loan planning.
Yep.
They think, I hope, and experience, just anecdotally, I've seen this. They think he's particularly good at that, but he can still do all the other stuff. And that's a really interesting kind of side effect of that more savvy consumer is that perceptual shift of you're not pigeonholed into this one thing. You just happen to be exceptional.
Exactly. You're so right, because when I get in through Smart Panel, it's like, oh, hey, can you wire up the rest of my house? Of course we can. We just love doing this. We're also still really good at that. We just actually like doing this.
Right.
But yeah, it's a great Trojan horse foot in the door. Just like, let me get the rest of the work. No problem.
It is, but that's the positive side of that. That more savvy consumer. Because again, rewind the clock 20 years, and if someone said, like, hey, we're smart home specialists, they're going, okay, I got to call him, and then I got to find an electrician instead of I'm going to call him, and he still does all the other stuff.
I get all of it. Exactly. And I think what helps us too, where I was trying to get back earlier, where if you claimed a thing, or a service, you didn't really have Google to go and double check if that contractor was telling the truth or not. Or anything. You got maybe referrals, so you're like, I guess I'm gonna go with the guy. Take your chances. Now you can go double check if that guy's lying. Go look up all that stuff. So I am always honest with everybody. I'm like, listen, you can just go look it up right now. So I'm not gonna lie to you on these things.
Right. Which again, there's that blessing and curse, right? The blessing is that your consumers can self-validate you.
Yeah.
Which is great, right? They can prove to themselves that you're not being.
You better be correct with what you're saying, man.
The issue with that, or the other side of that, is, if they're getting 3 quotes now, it's not some idiot who lied, some dummy who's never done it in you.
Yeah.
It's 3 competitive quotes from competitors that will also do a good job. That's the other sort of unfortunate.
And with the internet, everybody gets a microphone, so you're going to go on there, you're going to see everyone putting their opinion on what stuff should cost. So we'd be go, oh my God, I went online and I saw it would only cost $5,000. I'm like, yeah, I have no idea where you got that from, and it's like that's the part where you say that's the downside of it. Yeah. I know what we're talking about, and I know my numbers, but now I got to compete against the rest of the internet. Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah. Well, and to kind of come full circle here, right? I think that's where creative storytelling really comes into play. So that if you're putting out these stories or this content that people really, really connect with, it doesn't matter the other.
That's
two
why I don't put a lot of
competitors-
effort into that. Mine is more into let me get to know you on a super deep level, just to even make sense if it makes sense to do business together. Because we're not even trying to sell you on anything. Sometimes we get to the end of the call, we'll be laughing, but it doesn't make sense to do anything. And that's totally fine too.
I had one of those calls this morning where it was, I spent 20 minutes on the phone reconnecting with a client that I hadn't seen in a year. And by the end of it, we're talking about kids and dogs and wrapping up the boat for the year and things of that nature. And it's like you almost kind of forget to talk about work. But I walked away from that feeling that there was value in there, and so did he. Kind of jumping back into that storytelling thing too. One of the advantages I think of getting yourself more in the mindset as a business owner of creating an environment of storytelling around you is it counteracts some of that internet noise. It also counteracts some of that 24-hour news cycle source. One of we were talking this before we started recording, but the interesting thing now about the way that the news sort of operates is because they're in this cycle of news all day, every day. It's like they have to create. I'm going to use the word stories, but a different version. They create stories around things. We were laughing before about how a couple days ago there was this big news article that got posted. I think it was like number 1 on Yahoo News, and it was like interest rates are the lowest they've been since April. And it's like, well, yeah, that's factually true, but it's dishonest.
Oh my gosh!
And it's and again, factually true, but not honest. And so this is like my like latest little thing that I can't seem to let go of is this concept of true but not honest, right? So for example, and we were talking about this before,
true but not honest,
is if it was 100 degrees every day for a month, and then on day 31 it was 99 degrees, you wouldn't say it's the coldest day in a month. You would say it's not as hot as it was yesterday.
It's the coldest day of the month so far.
Right. But with this news cycle, it's like anything that peaks even like the slightest amount of newsworthiness becomes elevated to this level where again, like that news story should have been rates for the first time in a month appear to be coming down.
Yes, absolutely.
But that doesn't create a buzz.
Right.
So again, that is it true that they're the lowest they've been since April? Sure. But it's deceitful.
Wow, and that goes back to what we were saying at the beginning of this conversation was like how words like matter, your context, like all that stuff matters, man. And you can use it for good, but now like you just said, you could use it for like weaponize it.
Oh, it's like everything else. I think the analogy of a sharp blade in the hands of a surgeon is a tool of help, but a sharp blade in the hands of a killer is a tool of destruction. It's not necessarily about what the tool is; it's about how it's being wielded and wielded.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely, man. Jeez.
So, Zach, these are great conversations, man. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Can we have you on another time?
I definitely
I can keep going, man. I love talking about this stuff.
Let's go. We'll talk about Star Wars next time.
Oh, absolutely, dude.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love it.
Let's compare. How about the fall of the empire as compared to how that relates to business?
Yeah, or let's say,
There's a
or we
challenge.
could talk about, and again, I don't know your guys' opinions on it, but we could talk about the business decision of Disney in their direction with Star Wars. I don't know if you
that's
guys are
true.
still big fans or.
I have a hot take on that. I think I might get myself in trouble if we get on that right now.
See, I do it.
Yeah, I love to. Yeah, no, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Amazing, thank you.
This went a little bit off the rails from where I thought we were going to go originally, but I'm actually glad in the direction that we went. I feel like we covered a lot of really interesting ground.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of golden nuggets in this.
Yes,
for sure.
Holy crap, I'm gonna be chopping it up like crazy, man. Because I like to post a lot of Facebook reels to promote, and using a lot of these little 60-second, 30-second little wisdoms that you're dropping to promote.
Dude, wisdom's a strong word. I'm just throwing anecdotes at you. I don't think there's a whole lot of wisdom in here.
Well, I think what it was is it was the accumulation of all your anecdotes that painted a picture of your wisdom. Because you're bringing something that like every time we do these, man, like I just learn more and more stuff. Even though like. You keep saying, I pull it from this and that. Like the way you're putting it together. Again, it's the storytelling that helps resonate with me after this. Yep. So there's wisdom there, I think. Even if you don't say Mr. Humble.
Definitely. So, Zach, as if somebody wanted to reach out to you for mortgage lending, how could they reach out to you?
So you can find me on the Fairway website. If you just Google Zach Saunders, lender, New Hampshire, I'm sure I pop up a bunch of different places. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm on all the socials. So
if there's somebody out there that's interested in learning what BNI can do for their business, but not quite ready to attend a meeting, how can they reach out to you?
So you can find me on BNI Connect or BNINH.com. Those are kind of the two areas. If you Google Zach Saunders, BNI Director, NH, I pop up. But yeah, if you have questions about BNI, networking events, or if you're just looking to develop your skill set as a networker, feel free to reach out to me. I'm available. BNI is an unbelievably powerful tool to elevate your business to the next level, and very few small business owners take advantage of it in the full breadth of what it has to offer. So if you're interested in testing out the pool or seeing if it's something that you might want to jump into, give me a call and we can definitely run through it.
Absolutely.
Awesome, man. Appreciate that. All right. Zach, again, thank you for coming on. We're definitely going to have you on again.
Yeah.
And thanks for your time.
Yeah, we appreciate you, man.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. This was fun.
Awesome.
Let's go. Let's go.
All right, that's it. That's the end of the episode. I hope you enjoyed listening and hearing all the golden nuggets drop today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please stretch out with your feelings and share your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. Please leave a review and give 5 stars if you're feeling generous on whatever platform you get your podcast. You can find the Talking Trades podcast crew on all socials at Talking Trades, where you can get updates and behind the scenes. And you can go to our new website, talkingtradespodcast.com, for more information about the show and catch up on previous episodes. I am your host, Kris Levesque, the man who starts every day with a new horizon. You can find me on all socials at New Horizon Media Inc., where the new is NU. Dr. Electrician can be found at ionelectricalllc.com or on Facebook at Ion Electrical LLC. Listeners, don't forget, you too can go to buymeacoffee.com, where you can support the show for as little as the price of a coffee. Get your name and your message shared right here on Talking Trades. Thank you for your support, and keep on Talking Trades. This episode was produced by New Horizon Media Inc. Episode music provided by RB ReZe. You can find the artist at bandlab/RBReZe.com. We thank you for your music and contribution to our show. Put it on the table and